Ready to go?
Ryan? Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. I'm going to call to order. And this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the Medina City School District's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. If y'all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Chambers, if you'll call roll call.
Mr. Hilberg.
Here.
Ms. Parkhurst.
Here.
Mr. Ross. Here. Mr. Skidmore.
Here.
Ms. Pavlik.
Here.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to make a motion to move into executive session to consider the employment and discipline and compensation of a public employee or official in preparation for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. This executive session will only include the 5 board members with our legal counsel, who I will try to reach on the phone. I don't see him just yet.
I think we may also be inviting some other parties in at different points throughout that. And I don't know if Mr. Sable, if you want to list those or if you'd like us to.
Sure, we have representation from our Medina City Schools Teacher Association, and David Hammond is our president. Michelle Mueller is our vice president. Wendy Shabrowski is a representative officer, secretary, as well as the area rep Susan Dodge. And John Britton is the legal representation. And he just walked in. And in addition, I anticipate that, I don't want to speak for you, myself, David, possibly Chris and Jim as well. Okay.
Second. Aye.
Okay. Go ahead. Mr. Chambers?
How you doing?
Yes, Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg.
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst.
In
Ms.
2019,
Parkhurst.
the board was reminded that there is not an individual board member who has authority to speak or act for the board on their behalf. This is our Code of Ethics number 0123. As such, no board member has the authority to independently contact legal counsel without the knowledge of the full board and the superintendent and treasurer. Mrs. Pavlik took it upon herself to contact the attorney, Mr. Britton, and incur legal fees without the knowledge of this board.
We will now resume our work session. Mr. Sable would like to say a few words.
Sure. I just wanted to provide an explanation. I know we have a lot of community tuning in tonight, and we were abruptly cut off. When the board goes into executive session, that period of time of discussion is confidential, and there's specific parameters that are actually listed on the board agenda as to what the board is going into executive session for. There was some confusion on the technology end as we were taking the vote to go into executive session, and the feed was cut during the vote. And since it was cut, the board continued within executive session, and I believe it was a 2-3 vote, 3-2 vote to go into executive session. And thank you for everybody's patience.
I would like to ask if there's any additions, removals, or modifications to the agenda. No? Hearing none, I would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Mr. Chambers, roll call.
Ms. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg,
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore.
Aye.
Thank you.
At this time, I will turn the work session over to Mr. Sable.
Thank you. And I think we're getting to the part that everybody's been waiting for. This evening, we're going to be presenting our final back-to-school plans as to the Board of Education. This evening, I'll be asking the board to take a vote on our back-to-school plan, and that comes after the work session discussion later on when we get to the action items. A couple things I want to point out as we proceed is there's really two big topics of conversation or information to share tonight. The first is the actual back-to-school plan. The back-to-school plan includes two parts. The first part of that is returning to school. The second part of that is Online 2.0, which is the online component if we can't or don't return to school. Within that plan, there are parameters to help guide us in making those decisions. However, they don't make the decisions for us. As I stated in an earlier communication I think I just sent out last week, there's many parameters that we will be looking at and are looking at as we make these decisions, and the color coding system is just one of those. I do know that a big part of the conversation that's come up, and I know I've received many emails over the course of the weekend, and I do want to apologize to people. I know we all have received many emails, and it was at such a level where it's just impossible to reply to all of the emails, but I did want to make sure the community knows that those emails were not overlooked. Many of the topics that were within those emails I think are going to be discussed tonight, either in the presentation of what the back-to-school plan is, or during the conversation of what we're going to do on September 1st to open up the school year. I think it's important to point out and highlight there's a reason why it's called a back-to-school plan, because the goal of this plan is to get our students back into our school buildings as well as our staff, and to do that in the safest possible way. Thus, the two options within the back-to-school plan of the Online 2.0 with the actual physical return. I'd like to start the board discussion or the work session information through sharing more information about the Online 2.0 component of the back-to-school plan. We're then going to go through the actual return to school plan, having kids physically and staff physically back in the building. And then we're going to talk about the online digital academy, which is the second choice that parents have in terms of keeping their children online. So I'd like to introduce Matt and Sarah. They're both within our curriculum department. Matt works mainly with secondary education, and Sarah works mainly with primary, though I do know they work a lot together. And they're going to talk about the Online 2.0. The two of them have really put a lot of work in as well with our teacher leadership team to develop something that I believe looks very different than what we did in the spring.
Well, good evening. I appreciate the opportunity to share with the board a summary of the Medina City School Summer Learning Experience. Not only did I want to provide you with information regarding the feedback that we received from our staff, students, and parents, but I wanted to highlight how this opportunity has helped us aid in our planning as we consider Online 2.0 moving forward. So as many of you are aware, this past June we provided our students with a 3-week summer learning experience to focus on key concepts and skills that we felt our students might need additional practice with, that was focused on in the spring online instruction period. We recognize that learning online was a new experience for many of our students. It was a new experience for many of our school community in teaching in that manner, and we wanted to make this opportunity available to our students and parents. At the start of our summer session, we had 189 students that registered with us, and we focused on creating experiences for our incoming first grade students through 9th grade students. And we were very fortunate to work with many staff members and work with 13 teachers that provided that online opportunity. As I highlighted, when we began to outline the structure of the online learning experience, we looked at those key concepts and skills in the area of math and English language arts that we wanted to focus our online instruction around in that 3-week period. During that time, I wanted to really highlight and thank the teachers that joined us to make that experience such a success. Our teachers were really committed to working with students that in many cases they never had the opportunity to meet face to face, but they honored that learning is a social experience. And they found very creative ways to create an online learning community in a short amount of time, where we saw students really connect with their peers, establish strong relationships with those teachers that truly aided in the progress that we observed across that 3-week time frame. In designing those online experiences, we really wanted to learn what maximized student progress. So as we move forward in planning for this school year, we could think about those structures that students really responded to. There were 2 things that emerged both from feedback from our school community and our teachers that we have continued to incorporate into our discussions. The first, we increased the live sessions that were available to our students in that summer session and incorporated small group work experiences. And I'll share some of the feedback that we received from our parents on those 2 factors. What you see now is an example of the opportunities that were provided to our students. As I said, teachers recorded lessons in the areas of English language arts and mathematics. They provided a variety of practice experiences and really thought about creative ways to engage our students in an online format. So you'll see opportunities for brain breaks, art challenges that really kept our students engaged during that summer session. Our teachers also helped us to think about different ways that we could present content and information to our students. And this allowed us to look at a variety of examples and what worked well to support our planning for this school year. One of the things that really stood out to the district as we observed this process across the course of that time in June is how connected and the positive feedback we received from students. So in this example, at the end of the session, we observed a lot of our students posting comments both to their online class peers and their teachers of how much they enjoyed that experience and they wish it would continue, which is a true testament to the opportunities that our teachers provided in that time frame. At the end of the session, we also wanted to hear from our parents to really understand from their perspective what was successful in that online environment and what we need to think about moving forward. So we had 44 respondents to our parent survey, and we wish we would have received additional information from all of those that participated, but we were happy to at least have representation across all of the classes that we had offered in that online session. We asked parents to share with us what was successful or if the communication that the teachers provided in that 3-week was supportive in helping them to understand what their student would be experiencing and to support their student in that online environment. And you can see that we received very positive feedback. Over 80% of our families shared with us that the communication was successful and effective, and we utilized many of those examples, and again, in how we are structuring our online 2.0 learning schedule. We also asked if the activities provided were supportive to engage their students in further learning. 75% of our respondents provided favorable feedback. And we also asked about the amount of time that students were engaged in an online learning situation and if they felt like it was an appropriate match for their students. And again, we had incoming first grade students all the way through 9th grade. And as the survey indicated, over 80% of our families felt that the structure that we had set up, the combination of live and self-paced learning, was a match for what their student needed to continue to progress in those key areas. And again, these are all points that we have incorporated into our online 2.0 structure. One of the key questions that we asked in the survey is what best supported learning? And this is what we really wanted to understand as we continued our discussions for the upcoming school year. Our parents shared with us that the live sessions, the small group opportunities, and the teacher recorded material really aided their student in being able to progress in those concepts that we were focusing on. Some of the additional comments, as I said, our true testament was when we continued to hear from our students that they were sad to see the experience end. We were happy to hear many parents report to us that their students felt more confident within those skills that we focused on in the summer session, and that many parents reported to us that they felt that their students were prepared to transition into the next grade level in fall. We also wanted to think about areas that we can continue to grow as a district if we look at this type of opportunity in the future. And based on some of the questions that we had received from parents, we wanted to ensure that we are providing enough detail and communication to ensure that parents are familiar with what the experience would entail. And we also wanted to continue to reflect on how to support communication with parents regarding feedback on student performance. Our teachers did an amazing job providing feedback and support directly to our students, but that was one area that we want to continue to refine moving forward. So again, we could not have made this opportunity possible without the support of the teachers and their commitment to this online experience. And we were excited to see that both from the student end, our parents, and our teacher, that was a very positive experience. So thank you. Any questions regarding the summer session? All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. So I think it's great that we were able to start out with the summer learning because this entire process has been truly a learning experience for us as the staff as well. And one thing that we really gleaned from the summer learning experience is what we can do to really make some enhancements and some improvements to our online learning. And so I'm here to present to you tonight Online 2.0. And this is kind of the next iteration of online learning in response to what we provided last spring. So of course, Online 2.0 is a plan for continuous learning in the event that Medina City Schools is online due to community health concerns. And so what you're looking at here is a parent resource, and it's really intended to orient parents to the expectations that we're setting for online learning for our students and for really all of our stakeholders. I also want to point out that there is a voiced over video on our website as well that provides some further detail. if anyone would like to take a look at that resource. In addition to this website, I just wanted to share that we intend to provide a parent online boot camp before school starts. That's sort of an open house sort of orientation to online learning 2.0, because we know parents want to be successful in supporting their kids, and we want to be helpful in supporting our parents as well. So I think as we go through this, you'll notice that Online 2.0 looks different from what we offered last spring. I think our teachers did an outstanding job responding to a very unusual circumstance, and we were all kind of thrust into that online learning experience. And we kind of provided teachers with expedited professional development back in the spring, but that was really just kind of a Band-Aid to get us through that period. I think we know a lot more now, as I said, from our experience last spring and also from our experience over the summer. We received a lot of feedback from various stakeholders back in the spring, from parents, from students, from staff, and we took all of those recommendations into account as we developed this new plan for Online 2.0. The plan was also developed in collaboration with a group of our teacher leaders that represented all the various grade bands across the district. And we were really fortunate to have a group of teachers that have experience with online learning. Many of the teachers that were part of this group participated in a cohort a number of years ago where they're actually doing some professional development and action research around blended learning. And we had a blended learning situation within the high school with a small group of teachers, and they were part of this plan and development. So we thought it was important to really take a collaborative approach, engage our parents, engage our staff, and work together to come up with this plan. I think overall what you'll notice in the plan is more opportunities for student and teacher interaction that are built into the actual school day, and also a focus on increased accountability and support for student learning. I want to say that we recognize that online learning is not ideal. It's not going to take the place of face-to-face instruction. But regardless of our circumstances, we're committed to providing the very best educational experiences for our students, regardless of the learning environment. So this will really take all of us working together to make this successful. Every stakeholder will play an important role in the effort. So what you see there, Ryan, thanks for pulling that up, is kind of a summary of the expectations that we've defined for all of our stakeholder groups. So you'll see that we have a list for parents and caregivers working with their students, our student expectations, teacher expectations, and our administrative expectations as well. I'm going to move to the FAQ tab. I'm not going to read through all of the FAQs, but it is there for your reference. What I do want to do is kind of summarize the main differences that you'll see in Online 2.0 from what you saw last spring. So the first thing is we really wanted to increase opportunities for interaction between students and teachers. So we are going to expect that students attend virtual meetings twice a week. However, we also recognize that families are in a lot of different circumstances, and we'll work with families on a case-by-case basis if there's any sort of issue meeting at that particular defined time. So in other words, will we work with families if a student can't attend a session at a particular time? Absolutely, we will do so. We think that the opportunities for these check-ins are really crucial, though, and it's important that we're able to check in not just on the academic piece, but also on the social-emotional piece for our students. You'll notice that students will have more video-recorded lessons from their teachers. One thing that we received feedback on was that although teachers posted a lot of videos last year, they weren't always necessarily of them providing the instruction. So students really want to see their teachers more, and we want to make sure that we're increasing those opportunities. You'll notice that assignments are going to be due as based on the teacher's syllabus. So due dates will follow the course syllabus, and they'll be outlined by the teacher. We will continue to post assignments by 8 a.m. on Monday mornings. But again, just like when we're face-to-face, those assignment due dates may vary depending on the course or the teacher. And finally, all teachers are going to provide their instruction through Google Classroom. Last year, we had some teachers using Google Classroom and other teachers using Blackboard. And one thing that we heard from families is it was difficult to navigate 2 different platforms. So we're going to make sure that all of our instruction is delivered through Google Classroom. I'm going to step aside for a minute so Sarah can go through the elementary portion, and then we'll come back to the secondary.
As you visit the elementary page on our parent support website, I wanted to highlight a couple of the areas that you will see some of the information that Matt referenced. As Matt indicated, and what we learned through the summer learning session, we wanted to increase the live opportunities that students had to interact with teachers and their peers if we find ourselves implementing an online 2.0 instructional framework. On this page, you will notice that we have provided you an example daily schedule of what online learning will look like moving forward. And I wanted to just walk you through some of the experiences that you can anticipate seeing if we're in an online 2.0. In our elementary settings, all of our teachers will start the day in a live synchronous session with their whole class. It's an opportunity for teachers to welcome students into the day. It's an opportunity to check in with how the group is doing, as well as orient them to the activities that they will have posted and featured throughout the day. After that morning session, our teachers will focus their efforts into the area of English language arts, where students will have an opportunity to move through those recorded lessons from their teachers and the practice experiences at a self-paced process, because we do recognize when we're talking about our elementary students, there is variability in their stamina to stay and work at a computer, so we wanted to provide that flexibility. Teachers will also facilitate small group sessions with students during that time to reinforce, follow up, and provide feedback and continued support to ensure students are moving forward in those targeted areas. As we move into the afternoon, teachers will provide another opportunity to bring their whole class together to orient students into the skills that they're going to be focusing on in the area of mathematics, science, and social studies, which will be the additional activities that will be provided within that day. And the afternoon structure will follow a very similar format as the morning. There will be self-paced opportunities for students to work through that group, as well as small group sessions that the teachers will facilitate live as well. Throughout the week, our teachers will be providing our families at the beginning of the week a week at a glance. So families have information as to what opportunities and experiences have been planned so that they're able to support their child in accessing that online opportunity. Okay, now we'll turn it over back to Matt to talk more about the secondary structure.
So one thing I forgot to mention just a minute ago here is in terms of grading and assessment, we think back to last spring, we were grading based on completion. And one thing that we know we need to do in order to provide the sort of feedback that our students require is that we're going to move back to our traditional grading system using letter grades that follow our district grading scale. So assessment will take place just as it would in a face-to-face environment, and students will receive letter grades from grades 4 through 12. So just to walk through some of these bullet points to give you sort of an overview of what this will look like. As I mentioned, at the secondary level, there will be a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities. Sarah mentioned the schedule for elementary. We worked with our teacher leader committee to develop a schedule for virtual meetings that basically consists of every Monday, we follow the bell schedule. So every Monday, students will have an opportunity to meet with their teachers from each of their classes for about 10 to 15 minutes. And really the purpose of that is just to check in on kids, make sure everyone's doing all right, orient kids to the week, kind of do a week at a glance and take a look at what assignments are coming up and what the learning focus is for that week. Then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we take our bell schedule and we basically break it in half. So teachers will meet with the first half of their class on Tuesday and the second half of their classes on Wednesday. And each of those sessions will be about 60 minutes. We set this up so that there would be some flexibility within those 60-minute periods so that teachers could actually decide if they want to meet with small groups, meet with half their class for 30 minutes and then the other half the other 30. Or again, if they wanted to provide some targeted interventions, they could pull in small groups during that time. And we found with our summer school program that that was really the game changer, was having those small group opportunities with kids. Just kind of looking over these bullets, I think I touched on many of these things earlier. I do want to say our teachers are planning to aim to make learning as interactive and engaging for students as possible. That means as many class discussions and interactions as they possibly are able to do. And we already talked about the increase in posting of teacher lessons in video form and the increase in those class meetings, at least 2 times per week. In terms of communication, just as we did in the spring and as we would when we're face-to-face, email is an efficient way to contact your child's teacher. Teachers will be checking their email at a minimum of twice a day during the school week, and they'll respond within 24 hours. And again, teachers will also coordinate office hours in addition to those 2 days where those virtual meetings are scheduled. On Thursday and Friday on an as-needed basis, teachers will be available for some office hour time. It's a lot of information. Are there any questions?
Mr. Matty, can
Yes.
you speak to special ed and gifted services?
Sure. Do you, Mina?
Will
Would you like
I
to-
guess mainly my question is just, will they also be hearing from those teachers as well?
Special education services will be offered just as we would face-to-face, and the same with our gifted services.
Thank you. And
If
one
you
other,
had specific questions, I was just going to say.
no, it was just a very general question about that. I thought I saw a bullet point on there. I just wanted to hit that. One other question. I know this was sent out to parents, but if they are unable to find it in their email, where can they find this on our student website, or on our website? Can we remind them?
Yes, and again, it is on the website with all of our return to school plans. There is a video linked in with Mrs. Cassidy, our Director of Instruction, kind of walking through this back to school online 2.0 plan.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Manny, do you have the stats of the participation rate for the spring of online, of what kids, the amount of participation? Do you have those?
I do not have those numbers here, but I recall that our numbers were very high in terms of participation at elementary and secondary.
About 90%, does that sound correct?
That sounds correct.
So about 10% then weren't participating in the spring in class work since we were online. I just wanted to put that on the table. I know that we've got improvements with this plan, but it's really important for us to educate as high, and I'm not blaming you. You're up there giving the presentation, but I mean, it's important for us to educate as high a percentage as we possibly can. And I would hope that this plan will take that into account if we have to be online. It's my hope that we get back in the classroom, but I understand it's wise that we make plans for potentialities with the virus and so forth. But
Absolutely.
but I would hope we would get a very high participation rate. Thank you.
And the fact that our participation rate was so high last spring is really because our teachers did a great job reaching out to those kids that maybe weren't participating initially, finding out what was going on and pulling them in. And our administrators as well followed up with parents, and it kept our numbers high in terms of participation. I can get you the exact numbers because we did survey.
Yeah, I would like to get that if I could, plus maybe a demographic breakdown with it too, because we want to make sure that we help all the kids in the community. So that would be
Absolutely.
great. Thank you.
In line with that also, I think that I spoke with one of our high school assistant principals who said that the percentage of kids participating online was very similar to what it was when they're actually in person. So I think it's important to note that we don't always have 100% participation, even when we are in person. There are kids that are not doing their homework, and teachers are following up, and I believe that whatever a teacher would have done physically in person is what they were doing when we were online. Is that fair to say?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Hey, Matt, how did we solve the issues with families that were willing, but they just didn't have the means with the internet? Was that an issue in the spring? I mean, how did we get them to
We did. We had some families that were in that situation, and we provided opportunities for them to come. One of the things Mr. Sable talked about was having access through the high school and the parking lot. We had some families take advantage of that, some students. But for the most part, I think we were fairly effective in reaching our families.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Couple things before we move on, and I am kind of monitoring things online here, and we've got a team filtering through questions. I do want to remind everyone that we are handling things a little bit differently tonight. We do have an email address for people to submit direct questions. We found it very difficult in the chats the last time to make sure we were answering individuals' questions. So if anybody does have a question, I'm pulling up the email now. The email address is backtoschool@medinabees.org. The other thing I wanted to mention, just based off of some of the comments I'm seeing so people don't get overly frustrated, I'm not sure there is going to be a decision tonight on how we start off the school year. There is intended to be discussion. As I had mentioned in a communication last week, the plan is to have a formal communication for the community on Tuesday, so that's tomorrow. Next, we're going to talk about the second part of the Back to School plan. The Online 2.0 is just part of that. The second part is the actual return to school, and Dr. Kwolek's going to be leading us through that. Just for the sake of time as well, I know our second item to discuss is building level back to school plans. I think it would probably be a good idea just to combine these two discussions together.
Absolutely, and Mr. Sable will jump in whenever. Yep, Mr. O'Call will be our Vanna White for tonight. So this plan is available on our website. We can scroll through the beginning. It's Mr. Sable's introductory letter, and then I think as you go through, people are very familiar at this point with the level systems in the county. The next section looks at the different levels, yellow, orange, red, and purple, and then where our district would be based upon those levels. So we'll scroll through there. What we're really going to talk about today is some of the specifics. After this presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about the Medina Digital Academy online learning option and some of those deadlines. Mr. Sable and I will address that with you. So just briefly, I want to let everyone know the board adopted school calendar is on the website for parents to be able to print out and access. September 1st is the first student day. September 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th are a soft start to school. So on the 1st and 2nd, half of the alphabet will attend, and that's so we can get the students familiar with the procedures and the plans that we'll talk a little bit about. And then the 3rd and 4th, same thing, we'll do the other half of the alphabet and get the students back into the classrooms and ready and familiar with the procedures. So we've gone over these plans, but we just want to make sure we're clear with the public on what back to school will look like. So Matt and Sarah spent some time going over what Online 2.0 would look like. What does it look like if your students are back in school? And I know Mr. Sable and I have walked with some of our administrative team all the buildings in the district and looked at their back to school plans. And we have some pictures this evening because I think as a parent, it's helpful to see what you're going to be walking into and not just hear us talk about it. So the first thing we've been talking about, daily symptom checks. We are going to be requiring our staff to do a daily symptom assessment, and we're asking our families to do those symptom assessments as well. I know, and Mr. Sable and I have been getting a lot of different questions, and I'll try to throw in some frequently asked questions here. One of the ones we're getting is, why aren't we doing the temperature checks at the buildings? And so when we have very large middle and high schools, it's very hard to do those temperature checks and not create areas of congestion or backlog. The other thing in speaking about COVID is it's not just about temperature, it's about a cluster of symptoms. And so we want families to be able to do that with their students, or someone to be able to do that with a student, and that's difficult to do when you don't have a prolonged period of time to do that. So that's what the daily symptom assessment will be about. In terms of social distancing, I know Mr. Sable and I have both gotten a lot of questions about the 6 feet, 3 feet issue. I'm just going to summarize it this way, and I know Mr. Sable will as well. We so understand the concerns about 6 feet and 3 feet.
There are simply going to be some districts who have smaller sizes and are able to do 6 feet, and we are not. We are a larger district, so 3 feet is allowable. We will do 6 feet whenever we can. We will strive to do 6 feet when it's possible, but if we cannot do 6 feet, we will do 3 feet. So I think it's very important that we share that with our families and be very transparent and honest about what we're doing at that point. And when we share some of the classroom pictures with you, we can show you what that looks like. I think for some parents, when they hear 3 feet, it feels very crowded and clustered. And that's why we wanted to take some pictures today to show you what 3 feet looks like. In terms of, can you scroll up a little bit, Ryan? Sorry. I didn't think I'd need my bifocals this far away, but principals will provide, thank you very much, spacing of students during arrival and dismissal. We walked a lot of the building plans today. It will be different based on your building. Some will provide a staggered start. I know Claggett, for example, if I were to drop my daughter off, they're going to ask if you could do it between specific times so that everyone's not crowding at the same time. We are going to be marking off 6 feet spaces outside. Again, we're going to be doing 6 feet wherever we can, whenever possible. So you may drive by our buildings and see 6 feet markings outside so that if your child is outside of the building before they're allowed in, just like when you go to Home Depot and see the markings outside, we're going to show students how to stand 6 feet apart before they're let into the building. In terms of cafeterias, at the elementary level, we're going to do everything possible to have students eat in their classroom because, again, it's about the amount of exposure. So if students can remain in their classroom as much as possible, then they're exposed to less students. At the middle school and high school, we're transferring classes, we're transitioning. So we are just by nature in different classes with different teachers and different students. So eating in the cafeteria is going to be something that can be accessed. Student restroom breaks, we're doing a lot in terms of blocking off every other urinal. We talked a lot about urinals during our building tours, making sure there's only so many students in the restroom, and making sure we stagger restroom breaks at different buildings. We will make sure staff and administration and all staff are assisting with keeping people moving, which will be the most important part. I want to take a minute to talk about masks because this has been a very important item. And I actually want to take a minute to talk about the governor's order. So last I checked, the governor's actual order wasn't available on the website, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but what we are going to do, so there's no confusion for parents, this whole section will actually be replaced now by the governor's order because it's now an order. So we don't have that yet. The governor spoke of it, but we haven't seen it in writing. So at this point, we can't answer questions about mask breaks and mask requirements. But as soon as the governor's order is out, we will link it in our plan, and then we will go from there in terms of answering questions about those kinds of things. But again, the governor's ordered masks for students 3 and up. So we will require masks in all our buildings at all times until we are able to read that order and see when we can provide mask breaks and do some other things for students. So again, in our mask plan, this is our previous plan, but we'll replace it with the governor's order. The next section you'll see, students are still required to wear masks on the bus. That was there previously. In terms of cleaning, disinfecting, and hand washing, we are working on spraying down surfaces and having the students wipe them at middle and high school when they leave the classroom. At elementary, again, students will be at their own desk, so wiping that down before and after lunch, at the end of the day, and making sure that space is clean. In terms of hand washing, again, hand washing or sanitizing before we're using any surfaces that are shared. In terms of busing, again, this was another area that I think we've covered, but just to be very clear about it, we are allowed to have 2 students per seat on the bus. Because of that, we have limited busing, limited numbers of buses and limited numbers of drivers, so we do have to reduce, unfortunately, just temporarily busing at the high school. So we will need to have 2 students to a seat with masks, but again, because of that, there will be no busing at the high school. I'm going to keep down that train of thought. So because of that, there will be no parking fees for permits at the high school for high school students. But as some of the questions Amy and I got while we were here, you do still need to register your vehicle. You just won't need to pay to park. If you can go up a little bit more, Ryan. You do need a mask when you board the bus. We are asking parents not to board the bus with their student. If you don't have a mask and you simply forgot it, our drivers will have them to provide them, but we're not going to have unlimited supply. So if you ride the bus, we're asking that you wear a mask. The other thing, and I want to thank Rob Travis, our transportation director, he's worked hard to have hand sanitizers installed on the buses, so students will be able to hand sanitize when they get on the bus and when they get off the bus. In addition, the windows on the bus, weather permitting, will be down, and the roof vents will be open whenever possible as well. If you want to keep going. In terms of food service and cafeterias, we're going to do box lunches and breakfasts whenever possible. Again, at the elementary level, we're trying to reduce the students traveling throughout the building, touching shared surfaces like the cafeteria lunch line. So at elementary level, we're going to do everything we can to have the lunches delivered to the classrooms, where at middle and high school, the students can come and get their box lunch and then return to the cafeteria. We'll show you some pictures in a little bit of the cafeteria route with the X's marked for 3 feet social distancing when students eat in the cafeteria. Again, important that we have assigned seats in the cafeteria as well, because we need to know who you're seated by. So I know it's difficult for us as educators and also for parents, but students are going to have to stay in those assigned seats for the semester. I know in talking to a lot of the principals, central office staff found that the principals really are looking at maybe giving the students a choice that first day and then having them stay there. So I don't know that anyone's interested in telling kids where to sit, but maybe having them sit somewhere and then have them remain there. Students can always pack their own lunches, so that's been a question we've gotten as well. And then we will absolutely take food allergies into account and work with our families with food allergies. Thanks, Ryan. Recess, we spent a lot of time on recess. We want to make sure that students have an opportunity to play, to get outside, but to do it safely. So our elementary principals have worked really hard, and I want to thank Mr. Condit for coming up with a great idea. Students will be going outside with their classrooms, and we will be purchasing sets of materials so that the students can play in their small groups with balls and with other items, so that we can keep them safe, but keep them in limited areas and sections to be safe. The custodians will be cleaning the playground equipment frequently, and we're going to limit zones. Principals have some great ideas about limiting zones at recess so that certain students are in certain zones. Students will wash their hands before and after recess as well. In terms of, I'm just going to keep going. If you guys have any questions, just let me know. In terms of limiting exposure district-wide, we are not going to allow visitors into the buildings and classrooms. It's not something we want to do, but it's a safety issue. And so with every decision we make, it's a cost benefit. And for this one, it's just so important to limit the visitors in the buildings. For special education, I know Mina Pazidka is committed to ETR and IEP meetings virtually. We will make sure we make them accessible to parents, but we just have to limit the visitors to the buildings. Parents and you went too fast, Ryan, sorry. Parents and our family members are not able to drop off food, so we're not going to have food drop off for lunch, for classroom parties. No shared food is allowed at this time, and we're also not allowing food deliveries for staff or students at this time. Field trips and assemblies are just paused until further notice right now. Again, a lot of these things we're very hopeful will be back. It's just for now we're holding off on them. In terms of student pickup, so if your child is ill and you need to pick them up, we've worked out some procedures in the building so that you will stay either in the vestibule of the building or outside the building, call the office, and they'll bring your child to you. So again, in terms of contact tracing and how that works if someone should become ill, we're trying to just limit the contacts in the building. In terms of water, our custodial department worked very hard, and we worked with the health commissioner. Our refillable water bottle stations will be available for all students, but the water fountains will not. And we're able to do that. We can turn off the water fountains, but use the refillable water bottle stations. So we will update this page because right now it says we're checking, but we are able to make that happen. I know the Department of Instruction is working with Meet the Teachers. We're going to do virtual Meet the Teacher nights. So the plan is that the teachers will give you a virtual tour of their classroom, do an introduction, and so everyone will get to meet their teacher, even though we can't do it in person. Again, I know Mr. Sable and I have gotten a lot of questions. You can start school, but you can't do Meet the Teacher night. So the difference would be it's having parents and families in the building versus just having the students in the building. So that would be the difference with that one. Media center books, the reason those are not allowed is because it would be a large volume of students, different classes in the media center, touching a lot of different books. So again, the Department of Instruction has done a really nice job with bringing the books to the classroom in sets, letting the students take them home. Then once the students bring them back, they can sit over the weekend and then go to another student. So we don't want people to read this as we're not giving access to literacy. We're just doing it in a different way. And that's what we're trying to do with a lot of different things. Mr. Sable and I have gotten a lot of questions about attendance. So in general, attendance procedures will remain the same. If a parent calls in and says their student has COVID symptoms, we are going to require a note from a doctor for them to return. So it will really be based upon how that absence is reported. Another question we're getting a lot of, what if a teacher or student becomes sick? So it's very important, and I know Mr. Sable and I both have talked through this. The health department is the agency that is in charge of contact tracing. And what that means is finding out all the contacts that person with COVID had, determining how close that contact was, and determining what happens to the person based on the amount of contact they had. That's why we continually say the school is not an integral part of that, because we're not medical professionals. So we will not be the ones notifying parents. It will be the health department notifying them. We'll assist the health department in terms of our attendance lists and our bus seating charts and our cafeteria lists, but we won't be the ones making the first call. We wouldn't be the one calling you to notify you. It would be the health department. And then what we're going to ask is that you follow all health department protocols that they require and ask of you. Does anyone have questions about that? Because I know that's been a big question. No? Okay. So in terms of COVID, if there are a number of student or staff absences, the district may decide to close an individual school building. There may be issues with an individual classroom, but I want to stress too, the Board of Education is committed to adding full-time nursing staff in each of our buildings for the entire school day. So we do have fully trained medical staff in each of our buildings for the entirety of the student day. We're almost done. In terms of communication with a student or staff member, again, I can't stress enough, that comes from the health department because we're not the medical experts, and we also don't have the information they have in terms of the amount of contact and therefore the required treatment or protocol. Last section is travel. We've recently implemented the governor's travel advisory with our band and athletes, and that's who is here right now. So I guess what you would call our current students attending. And we will likely continue to do so if and when school is in session. So we would ask people, and we are asking people, to follow the governor's travel advisory and quarantine, self-quarantine for 14 days if you travel to one of the states in his advisory. Parents are then asking, well, are those excused absences, unexcused absences? And so by policy and law, the superintendent's allowed to excuse 10 days of absence. So it's hard for parents because if you go on a 10-day vacation, I was sharing today with a group of parents, and then you have to quarantine for 14 days, you've essentially missed 24 days of school. So again, we're committed to working with individual families because it's just an unprecedented time, and we'll work with you, but we can only allow 10 days to be unexcused, which doesn't mean we can't allow you to make up your work and get grades for your work. It's just how we accommodate for that. Anybody have any questions about any of that?
Chris, I just want to say thank you for your work on this building level back to school plan and your committee. I think it was some of the principals and Mr. Sable, all of you worked together, and I appreciate it. And I know there's been a lot of work in the minutia, all the different things, whether people take food in the building, guests in the building. And again, these are temporary things that would not be hopefully a reflection of the future just during this period. But my question, are you feeling pretty confident that this plan will keep kids safe that we have then?
I think I would echo what I think some other people have said. It's so hard to define right now. So I think even with the plans we currently have in place with athletics and band, as safe as those have been, we have not been able to stop kids from having cases of COVID and from having to stop some things. So I think that safe word is very hard to define at this time. It's just very difficult to say. Again, we can put protocols in place, but the safety issue is hard to define.
I guess as a psychologist, I know you've got a lot of knowledge. And so I guess from what happened in the spring where people are separated and at home and, 2 p.m., the governor's updates and all the things that go on with that. I mean, what's the fallout there? What about depression? What about possible suicide rates, things like that, especially long term? We talked about the fact that children's services were getting maybe half the amount of calls that they were getting previously, even though there would probably still be problems like that. So, I mean, I'm just wondering how you'd weigh that with the safety of the back-to-school plan.
Sure. And if you mean when we were in lockdown, I just think that situation was quite different because people were locked down and weren't able to go out and had some different things going on. So I think it's hard to correlate. I also think it's really hard to make big correlations between one thing and directly correlate it to increased rates of people completing suicide or increased rates of other things. So I think in general, what you're asking is the $1 million question, is what's best for kids to start the school year. And I think it's hard because I think safety has to come first. What does safety look like? There's a whole lot of different factors, but I think it becomes very difficult. We can come up with the best plan possible, but I think overall we're all just very concerned about having enough staff to staff the buildings and having the proper air conditioning now that we have to have masks all day for kids as young as 3. So I think it's just a whole bunch of different factors. I think COVID is stressful for everyone's mental health, no matter how you're learning. So it's just a very complicated issue. So what might help, Ryan, do you have the pictures? I think some of the
Chris,
things
can I add to that real
Sure.
quickly too? I just wanted to mention, and this is kind of a side comment, and somebody shared with me earlier today about what Progressive Auto Insurance kind of shared with their employees, and that was, this is our first pandemic. And I think to keep in mind that this is the first time all of us in our jobs, with our families, with our personal lives, are experiencing something like this. And this goes back to what I said earlier about the flexibility within this back-to-school plan to make adjustments, because the reality is we are going to be in situations where we're learning as we're going, but I think the important thing is that we're responsive when we see that there's areas that need to change or need to improve, and that'll be our goal.
So I think these pictures help people too, Rob. When you bring up mental health, I think what people are afraid of is the unknown. So what does that look like? I think people have this vision of 3 feet being so close and 6 feet being so close. And so I'm not saying I have the right answer for everyone, or that I just feel like, I think Aaron and I have said to people, we just need to give you the information that so you can make the best choice for your family. So I think that's what we're trying to provide. And I think pictures may be helpful. So as we walk through the elementary buildings, these are some of the work the principals did to create socially distant classrooms. Again, we can't do 6 feet in our district because of how large we are and how many students we need to fit in our classrooms at this point. So these are 3 feet spaced out desks at the elementary level.
And Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt, but and to clarify and confirm, it's edge to edge, correct? Or we've received
Yes.
some questions from parents about what is that 3 feet? Is it between people, middle of desk to middle of desk?
Yeah.
What is that 3 feet
And
measurement?
so Aaron and David and I were on a call with the health commissioner. I don't know that anyone's going to tell you it has to be measured this exact way. And the health commissioner is also going to tell you anytime you measure, a student's going to move around, right? So if you measure 3 feet from head to head, what about when the student moves? So we're measuring from desk to desk. We're looking to do a little more than 3 feet. We're not looking for exactly 3 feet, but I don't know that anywhere says you have to measure exactly from here to here. And Aaron, you were with the health commissioner during that call too, and I know David was. I don't know that she's saying you have to measure from center of chair to center of chair, or front of desk to back of desk, or there's no specific handbook. Like there's no handbook for this whole pandemic, as Aaron said. So I don't know if that helps, but I feel like people want clear answers, and we're trying to give them as we get them, but sometimes they're changing. Here's the middle school example, and I want to thank Mr. Farson and Mrs. Weber, who clearly were on their hands and knees, probably Mr. Goska too, putting tape down. So you can see the concept behind a classroom on the left, and then the floor where we're trying to help students understand one-way hallways. And also, if you're in 7th grade, you're going to go right. So Aaron, I think.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, because I think looking at this, it looks like it's like computer drawn or generated in there. This is not. This is actual fluorescent tape that they adhered to the floor in order to indicate the one-way hallways and things like that.
And again, what I thought was great about the middle one, sorry, Ryan, I knew you were, is if I'm in 7th grade and I'm new to route, but I know I'm going right if I'm in 7th grade, and if I'm in 6th grade, I'm going left. And they're one-way hallways. If you know route, they're kind of in a circle, so you can go one way. And I know we have people very concerned about congestion in the hallways or passing in the hallways, but we're trying to think about, remember, if it's one way, we're going to be moving. We're not going to be we're trying not to pass and stand still. And even if we are passing, we're moving as best we can.
Dr. Kwolek, could you, earlier today in the curriculum committee meeting, you stated with the health commissioner, talked about as far as movement and how movement in the hallway is different than sitting stationary?
Yeah, I think Aaron and I both talked about that. So I think she is less concerned about moving in the hallway. I mean, I think, so the question was asked, I thought you had to maintain 3 feet social distance at all times in the hallways. And I just shared, that's just not, we need to be fair and honest with people. That's just not physically possible. But if you're continually moving, that's less of a concern than if I'm sitting next to Becky for a 48-minute class. And I think Aaron has shared some of that as well.
Yep, and that's exactly why we're not allowing lockers and things like that, because it's important that we don't have students gathering in the hallways, that they move from one class to their next class. And the things we put in place, like the one-way hallways, keeping kids going in the same direction, are all ways to put another layer of protection in for our students when they're passing in the hallways. And it's the other important thing to note is it's slightly different from building to building. And we're just sharing with you some examples. Within the next week or so, our building principals are going to be sending out their building specific plans to the families that attend their building to outline some of these procedures that are put into place for their building. And like I said, for instance, we're showing here one-way hallways, which is capable over at Root. At another building, it may not be able to do one-way hallways. So they might implement another procedure. I know at Claggett, they were talking today when we met with them about having staggered class exchange times, because it's much more difficult to do one-way hallways at Claggett. So we are really taking a close look at individual buildings and the needs of those buildings. And we're working in building committees with staff, with head custodians, with our head kitchen individuals to help us work through this to do what's best to keep our students safe.
And actually, I think there's places at Root, if you look to the far right, that's a two-way hallway too. So there are some places as Aaron said, that they do the circle and other places where they did have to do two-way hallways too. And then the last one is a picture of a high school classroom. Just we wanted to make sure we did all the different classrooms. So different kinds of desks and showing you just the spacing and the distance. Anybody have any other questions about back to school plans?
So have we been able to maintain the same number of students in the classroom then with the 3 feet spacing, or have we had to remove desks because of that?
So there are some classes where we can't maintain the same number of desks. So in some classes we have to remove furniture. So some is teacher furniture, some is our stuff, and in some, no matter what, you can't fit that. So we're looking at moving to other classrooms or some other things. But again, none of that we'll know until we have the final numbers. But for the most part, students fit, but there are places where they don't.
And I think my general impression in touring the buildings the last several days is, and I think somebody may have already said it tonight, but the rooms kind of are stripped down where it's mostly just the student desks in the room in order to provide the appropriate spacing.
What about some of the elementary school classrooms where they don't have a desk, they have a table? What are we purchasing desks for them? Are
Sure.
we implementing something else? I'm sure that's a concern for some parents in those buildings.
So Northrop and Waite do not have desks. They have tables. And so in any time at an elementary when students have a shared seating area, we are purchasing plexiglass dividers to divide the students at their seating area because they're facing each other and they're also seated at a table. So Northrop, Waite, and Blake and Fenn also have that. So those are the 4 buildings where we'll be purchasing plexiglass dividers because the students, again, are sharing a table and are facing each other. They're still 3 feet apart, but again, because they're facing each other and at elementary, we'll be providing those dividers. Any other back to school questions?
I have another.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no
You
problem.
mentioned the meet the teacher night, and I know it came up earlier at our curriculum committee meeting about the high school orientation. Maybe can you speak to parents,
Sure.
let them know what
About
the status
Link
of that
Crew?
is?
Yep, so people are asking about Link Crew. I think we're waiting to see, and I know Aaron addressed it, and I'm glad because Amy and I were watching the questions. Everyone thinks, I don't know if we're going to have a big banner fall down, and Aaron's going to jump up and announce how school's going to start, but we're really looking to make that announcement tomorrow. But once we know that, we'll have some plans for Link Crew. So I know when you have an incoming freshman or you have a 6th grader or a kindergartner, you're anxious for how are we going to do back to school. And so freshman orientation or Link Crew, we will have, it's kind of a to be determined in terms of how we'll proceed with that. So I think Amy and Aaron and I were talking about getting kind of an up-to-date calendar for the district on the webpage. Good. So I think the last thing we want to present and kind of talk about is our online program if parents sign up for that. And I want to start, and Aaron, please jump in. I know Aaron and I have talked about this so much, sometimes we catch each other with the wrong date because it's an old date. So we're gonna catch each other on this. So I want to clarify to parents, if you have filled out a form for the Medina Online Digital Academy, that is a commitment form. And so you've committed to the program. We have your email. You don't have to fill it out again. And then in the next day or so, we're going to send you a registration form. That's the final form you complete, and it's going to say on there, once you fill this out and hit submit, you can't turn back. It's your semester registration for MODA, the Medina Online Digital Academy, and that is when your child is signed up and you can't turn back. That deadline is Tuesday at midnight, and we moved that deadline because we wanted parents to know how the school year was going to start tomorrow.
Yep, and
I'm
that
waiting for someone to correct me if I'm
that
wrong.
registration form is going to go out immediately after the announcement, which I'm hoping we're able to do tomorrow morning to give parents time. Again, if you want the opportunity to get that registration form, you need to do the commitment form. If you make a decision tomorrow that you no longer want your child in the digital academy, simply do not return the registration form when you receive it.
And so the reason we're doing that, if it sounds like, why do I got to fill out 2 forms? We wanted to get an initial sense of how many people were interested so that we could look at curriculums and look at different things. And then we wanted to give people the ability, if they had changed their mind once they decided how school was starting or once things progressed, to make a final decision. So we're trying to listen to input, and we've changed the deadline based on those things as well.
So to clarify, if people are thinking at all about the Digital Academy, they have until 11:59 tonight to do their commitment form, but then if they change their mind, they don't have to do the registration. Is that correct?
You can do the commitment form
Yeah.
until it closes, but you have to register by midnight tomorrow.
We could have the entire district,
Commit.
we could have 7,200 students tonight fill out the commitment form for the online digital academy. The enrollment is based off the return of the registration form. If you want an opportunity to have a registration form, you need to complete the commitment form. So the advice that I've been giving parents is if they're unsure, if they're waiting for additional information, complete the commitment form. There's no risk in doing that. You still have an out.
And again, I won't go over this whole handout, and we have a website for parents, but the idea is then you're insured that your child will be online for the first semester. But you're committed to that, and you can't then decide to come to school or switch back and forth. It's your 1 semester commitment to online. Any questions about that? I know we've done some presentations. If you go to the website, there's a website on the Medina Online Digital Academy, so I'm not going to go through that.
No, and I think in terms of the Digital Academy, I know at the last board meeting, we covered this in a lot of depth. There's been a lot of discussion, and we spent a lot of time rehashing things that I think we've already shared, maybe with more detail, and that's because we want to make sure, as we ask the board to take a vote on our back-to-school plan, that it's clear what we're looking at, and also we're cognizant of the volume of parents that we have watching tonight, so we want to make sure all the information is out there. I want to reiterate with the Digital Academy that this is the second choice that parents have. The Online 2.0, as well as the physical return to the buildings, is the back-to-school plan. And in the Digital Academy is the second choice for parents that know they feel uncomfortable with their students returning and are electing to have their children in the Digital Academy for a full semester. The Digital Academy down at the elementary level is Online 2.0. And I know we haven't put that out there openly, and the reason why is because we were worried about people getting confused between the Back-to-School Online 2.0 and the Digital Academy. Those parents are still making a full semester commitment because what we're going to be doing is reassigning teachers in order to teach that Online 2.0. At the middle school and high school, we are using Apex. There's been a lot of confusion about Apex as well, especially with some of the advertising that's out there for them as a credit recovery program, which they are. We've actually used them for many years for credit recovery purposes. They were originally created as an alternative delivery system for AP coursework for schools that weren't able to offer that coursework. I think over time, they kind of developed a niche with the credit recovery. They still offer the full school portion, though. Our middle school and high school students are going to have available to them multiple course offerings, which include honors and AP. In addition, one of the other reasons why we liked Apex is because it follows Ohio standards, which they don't all do that. And the second piece is that we're able to go in and modify them. So what our curriculum department is doing is they are going into Apex and they are working with teachers to dig into the different classes to make sure that it's as close to Medina curriculum as possible. In addition, they're also going into the system to adjust for gifted education and also special education as well. In addition, I don't want parents to think that with the Digital Academy, especially at the middle and high school levels, that we're just going to be throwing students out on their own, because that's not the plan. The plan is actually that there's going to be regular communication with the teacher. And there's going to be homeroom check-ins because we want to make sure we're continually monitoring our students. And we're also going to have teachers available to provide additional help to students that might be struggling in a class, because I fully understand I've got a high school daughter and I cannot help her with her math. And her sister is going off to college, so her sister can't help her. So we're going to make sure that we have teachers available to be able to work with students that need additional help as well. And I might suggest we take a quick break. We've completed, I think this is a nice place to break, because we've completed the back to school portion that we're going to be presenting to the board for approval. I anticipate the other work session discussion items will go a little quicker.
We'll take a short 5-minute recess.
A couple items I wanted to share tonight. We've talked a lot about what the buildings may look like for the opening of school. We recognize it's important for our students and our parents to be able to see that. We're working on a series of videos, an elementary video, a middle school video, and a high school video that's going to share information about some of the stuff we talked about tonight with the one-way hallways, with the cafeterias, and make that available probably through our YouTube page as well as our web page to provide parents and students more information and make them feel more comfortable with a return. The other thing I want to mention, and I think Dr. Kwok actually may have said this, but I want to reiterate it, building orientations, open houses, and conferences will all be digital no matter how we start the year. It's important that we limit the amount of people entering and exiting our buildings. In terms of things like freshman orientation, we are working on that and we'll make final decisions pending the decisions that are made tomorrow as well as the online enrollment. So those will be coming soon as well. The last item for discussion for the work session I have is the opening of the 2021 school year. We spent the bulk of the meeting so far presenting what the back-to-school plan is. So the big question, and I know the one that everybody is waiting for, is which part of that plan are we going to step into the school year with? Is it the online 2.0 piece, or is it the back-to-school piece? And that's what we're working on determining in terms of what's best for students and staff. It is not an easy decision. I think just looking at some of the comments on Facebook tonight, you can see what a difficult decision it is. And I can tell you amongst the administration as well as the board, we've had a lot of really difficult conversations in trying to determine what's best for students, not only academically, but socially, emotionally as well. It's not easy. I mean, I know I keep saying that, but it is like we're in a situation where there isn't a right decision. And I recognize, I'm going to speak openly, that no matter what the decision is, I know that people aren't going to be happy with that decision. And what I want to promise the community is that we do want our students back in school. Again, that's why it's called a back-to-school plan. The piece that's very difficult is what's the best timing and the best way to do that that's going to protect our students mentally, socially, as well as academically. We've presented the different avenues that we could go this evening, and I just want to provide the board an opportunity if you wanted to share any additional information or had questions for us that we could answer those.
Aaron, we never talked athletics. Is that for another day?
Athletics is actually a separate entity
Okay.
from returning to school. We're handling that through our athletic department, and that's a good question, as well as through the guidance of the Ohio Athletic Association. I can tell you what our philosophy has been and our approach with athletics. We are trying our best to continue to make athletic and extracurricular programs, I'm including band in that, encore, available to our students. We recognize the importance of the social, emotional interaction piece for our students, as well as getting it out of the house. So we may be in a position, it's possible, where we could be online and we may still have some athletics continuing. What I want to point out is that athletics have been operating, and I know it doesn't necessarily always look like it when you drive by a field, but they are operating under some fairly strict guidelines in terms of being back. And I know you see groups of kids, but those kids are in pods of 10. They're always practicing with that same group pod of 10. The coaches have masks on. There's daily temperature checks before students can even start practicing. The guidelines are different depending on the sport. In individual sport like golf, it's much easier, obviously, to social distance than it is with football. The OHSAA, in terms of football, did come out with a recommendation regarding a shortened season. However, they also mentioned that they're waiting for the governor and the state to approve that or not. I know the governor's got a meeting tomorrow at 2, and part of his conversation is supposed to be back to school. I don't know whether he's going to include that or not. I know usually as much as the community knows in terms of what's coming from the governor's meetings. We are also having discussions amongst our league, what's best for the league. And I think you see the same thing happening at the college level. Big Ten, I think, just announced today that they're canceling their football seasons. The MAC announced that over the weekend. We are working with the GCC to make a league decision as well in terms of how we might be able to proceed. We are aware that many of the schools in our league are in Cuyahoga County, which is one of the highest risk areas in the state. So that is something we will consider as well. In addition, we are considering alternative pathways that may be available. If we're not able to have league games, is there another way we can provide opportunities for students to continue to engage in the athletics in other avenues? But the big thing is we're waiting for information from the OHSSA as well as a state decision.
I guess I'll jump in first. This has been a topic that we probably, in my almost 7 years, has received the most amount of emails on. People are passionate on all sides of the equation. I respect opinions from our staff that have some concerns. I think this board wants to be sure that our staff are kept safe, and I actually feel pretty confident with the plans that Chris showed us tonight and the further work that's being done with the building plans as far as the distancing. And then the unknown factor at this point is really the amount of kids that have signed up for the Digital Academy. If it does end up being 1,100, we don't know for sure how much that space will be in some of those classes. So I think some of that will shake out once you have that. But as far as, I truly believe education is essential. When we go to a grocery store, you have workers there. When we go to the doctor, your doctor's there, your nurse is there. They all have protocols in place. Yes, plexiglass is in a lot more use now. And I understand that there's some concerns that all can't totally happen in every classroom. But I do believe, I have faith in the administration that they can make those things happen with their department and make things be done safely. I support Mr. Sable with the online work. I think there's been great work with 2.0. It does bother me in the spring when we had groups of kids that didn't log in, and I think it's different than not turning in an assignment. They just weren't even in school during that period. So if they didn't log in at all, it's like a whole series of absences. So I have a concern there. I know that the district did the best they could with the mandate to be closed. Speaking of mandate, it's no longer a mandate at this point that we be closed. So now it's up to the local boards. There is this color coding system. I understand we're just barely in the red right now. We don't know, we can't predict where we will be by opening day. We don't have a crystal ball. We also don't have enough time that these masks have been mandated. I think it's, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks they've been mandated. So in theory, the new cases of COVID should decrease with the use of these things. People are still, I think, being careful with their contacts and so forth. So I support everything you're doing with it. I guess all I'm saying is I think it's essential. It's essential work. I don't think a kindergartner sitting in front of a computer all day is getting the same education they get in a class. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with me. They're just not getting the same education that they would get in a classroom. And the question is, can we do that? And I don't know, maybe there needs to be a way that we are looking at in person for the younger kids and online for the older. And maybe if we approve this tonight, maybe you have the ability to blend that to some extent. I don't know, probably, or you could modify it. But I do support Mr. Sable. I support our teachers that have reached out to us directly. We had quite a few emails there. And, some of them do want to be back in the classroom. Most don't right now. Most feel that we should be in the online. And that's, everybody's entitled to their opinion on it. And I believe that we can do it. So those are my comments, and I yield back. Thank you.
I agree with most of what Rob said. I think the administration and the staff have done a great job of putting together a well thought out plan. I also feel it's extremely important to have our kids in school. I think they need that social interaction. I think they need that face-to-face time with our teachers. It looks like we've attempted to address as many of those safety issues as we can with this plan. It's a tough decision. Like Aaron said, we're not going to make everybody happy, no matter what decision is made. I'll reiterate that I do want to see kids back in school. I hope that that's the route we go. And for the parents that aren't comfortable with that, they have the option of going with the online academy.
I'll provide some comments. I would agree with both Rob and Brian. I'm going to support fully Mr. Sable. I think you and your staff have created a great plan, and now it's just up to us to figure out, which direction we're going to go. If we had to do it today, though, if we had to decide on which plan we're going to choose, I support starting with the online 2.0, and the reason is because again, we're not going to please everybody, but we have a huge responsibility for the safety and the well-being of our staff and students, and that includes our community. And right now with this virus, I just don't want to risk someone or a group of people infecting our staff or students. I don't want it to happen on my watch. And our county right now is in the red zone. And again, that could change between now and the beginning of the school year. But for right now, we're in the red, which means our infection rate is very high. In fact, I didn't look at the data today, but out of the 88 counties in Ohio, I think I don't know how many are in the red. Do you know, Val? Maybe 10?
I believe there's 11,
Okay.
but if you look at the website for the coronavirus, the Medina County is down like 68th as
Okay.
far as cases.
So-
And I have numbers that I will share in a few minutes.
Okay. But as far as the state is showing us, we're in the red right now. So if there's 11 counties in the red, and we're one of them, that means 77 other counties are doing better than us. So what that tells me is, we're in a high-risk area, and I just don't want to put our kids, our staff, and our community in a position to get infected. I also think that online 2.0 is not forever. If we started with online 2.0, I think it would be a lot easier to transition into in-person after starting online 2.0 than it would be if we started in person and then we had to shut everything down. I think there would be too much chaos with starting in person and then having to shut it all down. So I think if we progress slowly and safely, I think and then monitor how we proceed with the numbers and the data. I like that approach. I think many other districts and even, like Aaron said, colleges are starting online. And Mr. Hammond provided a lot of great information from MCTA, which I thank you, Dave, for doing that, which shows a lot of our staff would, not everyone, but a lot of our staff would also like to start online 2.0. But again, it's not forever. And then eventually, when the numbers change, hopefully we beat this thing sooner than later, and then we'll get back to in-person. I think everybody wants to get back to in-person. I share Rob's passion that that's the goal. We want to be in person, but we're faced with an unprecedented challenge to do it the right way. And so I don't want to be aggressively irresponsible. My position is slow and right and safe, and then keep watching the numbers and then transition as we get confident that we can do it in a safe way. So that's kind of my take. Again, it's not going to make everybody happy, but I don't know if we have to vote on that tonight, or is that the plan? We gotta.
Yes, you're voting on the plan tonight, which will be sent down to Columbus. That's the back-to-school plan with the online 2.0 as well as the return to school. However, a decision to determine how we're going to open the year will be coming tomorrow.
Okay. So those are my comments, and but I do want to support our staff, especially Mr. Sable, and I just want to thank you. This summer has been very hectic, and it is much appreciated, all the work you and your folks have done. It's not to be forgotten. So thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank the group that was outside today to meet us as we came in. I don't think we've had a reception like that in quite a while. And I would like to thank everyone that emailed or called me to express your opinions and concerns, whether it was a parent or community member or staff member. I appreciate hearing from all of you, and I tried to get back to as many people as I could before this evening. I agree with what everyone has said so far, that the best place for kids to be is in school. We know that's where they learn best. However, like Mr. Sable said, this is my first pandemic. I hope this is my last pandemic. As a board member, I have a responsibility to ensure the safety of everyone that enters our building, and they need to feel comfortable and confident that they will be safe and healthy while they are there. They are in our care. That is a heavy burden. That weighs heavy on me. I know it weighs heavy on our board members and our administrators. I think it's important to rely on science and on the data. And every day we do learn something new. There were articles in the Plain Dealer this weekend that they're finding, and you've seen it with the schools that have opened up and then have to close down right away. Kids do get sick. Kids do carry this home to their family members. And now they're finding that people don't just recover right away. They are finding that there are long-term consequences to people even when they have recovered. And recovery is a long time. I received an email from a parent who is a nurse, and it took her 5 weeks to recover. And in the meantime, while she's recovering, she also has kids that she's trying to take care of and make sure they don't get sick. This is serious, and I will always make my decisions based on the side of science. I will err on the side of caution. Our kids in our community, it's too much a responsibility to just come back too quick. I am confident in the plans that we saw tonight that our building administrators and our teachers will do everything that they can to make it a safe environment, but we cannot guarantee that everyone in that building will be safe. I prefer that we start online, and that gives our building staff time to fully develop those plans. Again, we saw some of those photos tonight, but this gives them time to really develop those plans, to review those plans with their staff, to have their staff feel comfortable and confident with those plans as they return to school. And then they can share that with our students, because it is not going to look the same. I know parents are anxious to get their kids to school. I want my kids to be in school, but it is not going to look the same as it did when they left in March. There's going to be plexiglass, there's going to be arrows, there's going to be all kinds of new rules that they have to follow. And by giving us some extra time, it helps get everyone comfortable and confident in our procedures, as well as we will know more about the virus in that time, and hopefully our county will no longer be red. We've been red for the last 3 weeks. I know cases are decreasing, but they're still on the rise, and there's other factors that go into making us red. And I think if our community can do better and it gives us more time, we can get back to school sooner then and maybe stay in school longer. We had a curriculum committee meeting today, and several of the parents are concerned about going to school, and then we have to come back out of school, and then we go back to school. And that's not good for our students either. There needs to be some stability in their education. The online 2.0, I'm confident in that. Mr. Hilberg talked about face-to-face education, and our students will get that face-to-face education with the online 2.0. So, again, to summarize, I really feel that we should start online and reassess as time goes on. Thank you.
Okay. I do know that no matter what is decided, that people won't be happy. And I do hear, and again, my inbox was flooded as well, supporting in person, supporting online, and it is definitely valid reasons on all ends. I hear the teachers' concerns, and I believe a large part of that is because they were the first ones out and they were the last ones to return. And a nurse friend of mine had shared with me a little, and it was, she had messaged me about how nurses felt back when they went back. They were terrified. They weren't ready. They didn't know what was to come. They didn't want to change their ways. They couldn't imagine what each day would look like. They were stressed, exhausted, overwhelmed, anxious. But fast forward 5 months, and our nurses, our policemen, all of our Target workers, our Walmart workers, all of our essential workers, people who have returned to office buildings with 500 plus employees. Yeah, the first couple of days they were nervous, but once they saw the protocols put in place, the plans that were put in place, just like our administrators have been working so hard on, it got better for them. They are okay. They've adapted. They're stronger together. They are essential and they feel their own worth. They make a difference and others know it. And they're proud to go to work. And she's encouraging that many of the teachers and educators are going back to work in the next few weeks, and it is scary. But as all of those essential workers can vouch for, it will be okay. Okay? Be flexible, be strong, be creative, be proud. They're needed. Our kids need them now more than ever, actually. And again, I just thought that was awesome that she had shared that with me. We need to ensure that the underprivileged in life are not left behind. And I know, Rob, you mentioned that before. Okay? Otherwise, the gap of the haves and the have-nots, it will only continue to widen. Okay? Because we educate every student here at Medina. We have to think of the whole child. It would be naive to think a case of COVID isn't going to happen. Okay? But we need to look at the data. Okay? And I've been asking our local reporters and newspapers to give the numbers in context. Because if it's not, all it does is escalate anxiety, and I think a large part of that is present. The fear that we're instilling in our children is unforgivable, actually. Governor DeWine, back last week, he goes, there are no guarantees in life, okay? We were forced to close back in March. We had no choice. But now the state's given us the opportunity to open. They provided guidelines. There's a link in the presentation from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Their goal, or they state that the goal of every school district should be to have students physically present in the school. I know people have been saying, look at other schools in other parts of the country that have opened and then had to shut. We can't look at other parts of the country. We have to look here at our numbers and use that as our correlation. And Ron, that's what I was saying. Medina County is ranked 68 in the cases. Our health commissioner last week, August 6th, she stated that the county is not deemed high incident on the state report card. There is 2.85% case that has pushed us to red. That's less than 3 cases, and that's why we are in red. It's not because we are a high incident county. So we have to look at all of it. She mentioned, again, about keeping the students in pods. They've reassured local superintendents that they're sufficiently staffed to handle any additional workload. And every day after 2 o'clock, I look at the numbers, and I go to the coronavirus, and I did provide this to each board member, Ron. That was from me. About how many cases that are coming up every day, and how, yes, there is a fluctuation, but if you take the number of cases that have been diagnosed and factoring in the recovered, in Medina County, there's only 167 active cases in a population that spans 179,746 people. So again, we have to look at our county, our area, and not Georgia, not compare ourselves to Georgia or North Carolina, but see what is happening here. And the long-term ramifications that we are looking at for these kids are going to be felt for a very long time. And for the students, I do believe the best thing for them and for everybody as a community, as a whole, is to be back in school. And I think that now with the pictures that have been shown, the presentations, Aaron and Chris and all of your administrators, the diligent work that they have, are we ever 100% safe in life? I could imagine everybody can say, no, we are not. But for the long term, for these students, I feel it. I mean, that's my thoughts. So thank you.
I have action items to present to the board. The first are items on the consent agenda. Number one is a revised resolution for transportation for the 2021 school year. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the revised transportation resolution, which deems students from non-public schools and students living outside the non-public school attendance area as ineligible for transportation for the 2021 school year. I do want to point out to the board that this is the same resolution that was presented at the last meeting. There's a correction that needed to be made on the resolution in regards to grade levels for the Medina Christian Academy. Second is a mask policy. This is for a first reading with a final recommendation at the next board meeting. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following new mask policy for a first reading. This policy is required per the COVID-19 health and prevention guidance for Ohio K-12 schools, page 14, and we have a link listed there in case anybody wants to access that. The policy will not be presented to the board for final approval and potential adoption until the regular August 2020 Board of Education meeting. And again, I want to stress we are required, as all other schools in Ohio, to put a mask policy into place. Number three is service agreement. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following service agreement. And this is to work with LACA to provide registration gateway for the upcoming school year. We are no longer with LACA. We are now with NeoNet. However, LACA offers registration gateway and NeoNet does not. NeoNet does offer other types of registration software. As you can guess, the timing to transition registration software is not ideal right now. So we think it's important to continue with that portion with LACA. And last in the consent agenda is personnel. It is recommended that all the following personnel be approved by the Board of Education pending completion of all appropriate paperwork with the Human Resources Office. In here is included our curriculum development coordinators, which are teacher leaders across the district who have played a strong role in the development of much of what we shared this evening. In addition, there are also two retirements on the agenda. The first one is Fran, I'm not going to say this right, sorry Fran Battaglia. Did I get it right? Good, thank you. MHS paraprofessional is retiring with 13 years of service to Medina City Schools. Fran spent her years in Medina working with our high school intensive students. Fran is looking forward to retirement, hopefully some travel when allowed, and will most miss the students she has worked with over the years. The next is Joe Stefanko. Root Middle School Project Lead the Way teacher is retiring with 33 years of service to Medina City Schools. Joe originally started as a paraprofessional while he was studying to become a special education teacher. Joe was then hired by Medina as a special education teacher and worked in that capacity from 1988 through 1999. In 2000, Joe switched to teaching industrial technology classes, which he then changed into teaching Project Lead the Way to root 8th graders the last 3 years. Joe looks forward to retirement, but can't do too much yet, as his wife, Teresa, will continue teaching 6th grade at Root Middle School. We wish both Fran and Joe all the best in retirement and thank them for their years of service to Medina City Schools.
I'll make a motion to accept the superintendent's action items.
I'll second.
Any changes or discussion?
I,
I just one question. Can the curriculum development coordinators be retired?
The curriculum development coordinators is a supplemental contract for teachers that are currently hired within the district.
But I see, okay, because one of them's retired.
Yep, she's actually not retiring until we get later into the school year, and she's going to fulfill that contract, which I appreciate that she's doing that because we can use her leadership and guidance right now.
Yeah, I concur. I'm not saying that to be negative. I just had to ask.
I have one question, Mr. Sable. Are we hiring somebody named Courtney, or is that a typo? That's her real name?
That's
Okay.
her name, yep.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any public comment on the superintendent action items, Mrs. Busby? No? Okay. Hearing none. Mr. Chambers?
Ms. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore,
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg,
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Thank you.
The next item, next action item on the agenda is the back-to-school plan as presented in detail this evening. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the district's back-to-school plan for the 2020-2021 school year. A copy of this plan does need to be submitted to the state no later than August 12th, which is this Wednesday. An abbreviated version of our detailed plan is what will be submitted to the state pending board approval.
I move we approve the plans.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
No, I just want to clarify. So that's our plan, but it's not saying what we're going to do. It's not picking the option that we're going to select.
That is our plan. It does outline what we're going to do as a school district. It does not outline how we're going to open up the school year. And I think that was a lot of the discussion at the end of the work session.
Okay.
So however we open the school year, if this plan is approved, it'll be one of the options or guidelines within that plan.
Mr. Sable, did you want to speak to the board or the community about what happens if we do not approve the plan tonight? What it means if we don't have a plan approved to the state?
All school districts across the state are mandated, or they're not mandated to submit a plan. They can choose to submit a plan. If a plan isn't submitted, then any days missed, canceled for COVID, unless it's the governor's order, would count as calamity days, similar to a snow day.
Again, Ron, just to clarify, this back-to-school plan does not state on September 1st, we're online, or September 1st, we're in the building. What it states is, come September 1st, it's going to be one or the other. Does that help clarify? Okay.
Yeah, this is just showing that we're going to approve a plan that has really 3 options.
Correct.
And that's what's going to the state.
One other comment, briefly. I don't want to rehash everything, but it's different than what was said before, okay? I do think there's more of a likelihood when you start online, you're going to stay that way. And so that would be, if it was up to me, I would go back in class. But I think, I just think we're more likely to stay that way. But I would hope that we would get back into the classroom as soon as possible. But I don't want to rehash the whole conversation we just had, but I just wanted to make one statement.
Okay. Is there any public comment, Mrs. Busby? None? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Chambers?
Mr. Skidmore,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg,
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Thank you.
And the final action item for tonight is a memorandum of understanding with the Medina City Schools Psychologist Association for their successor agreement. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding for a one-year successor agreement with the Medina City Schools Psychologists Association effective July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021 as attached.
I'll move we accept it.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Just clarification. So this involves 7 employees?
We have approximately 8 employees as psychologists in the district, and this recommendation is to roll over their current contract with a 1.75% increase.
Thank you.
Again, we just appreciate the work that you and Chris and Jim did with this association to get this done over the summer with everything going on. So we appreciate the work that went into that. Thank you.
Yes, I agree, because these employees will definitely play a critical role, I believe, as we get these kids back into a school frame of mind. So, any public comment on that item, Mrs. Busby? None? All right, hearing none. Mr. Chambers, call roll, please.
Mr. Skidmore,
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg,
Aye.
Mr. Ross,
Aye.
Ms. Pavlik.
Aye.
Thank you.
I'm sure these are the questions, right? At this time, the public content of the meeting, community members wishing to address the board are asked to abide by the following guidelines. Attendees shall register their intention to participate in the public portion of the meeting upon their arrival at the meeting. After those that have registered have spoken, if time allows, the board president will ask for public participation from all other attendees. Please state your name, address, and affiliation. Please keep comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic unless all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. And I believe, Mr. Sable, you've been receiving emails throughout the course of the meeting. So I'll turn this over to you.
Yep, we've received many emails throughout the course of the evening. I'd say surplus of 30, which there's no way we could answer within the time frame here tonight. What I want to recommend to the board is that we answer all these questions in detail and respond to these individuals and also post them for the public on our website. I will hit upon a few that I've consistently seen. One of those is about filming classes and having students be able to watch classes from home as an option. The reason why that is not an option is because we're required by law to follow FERPA, which is similar for education as when you go to your doctor's office. So there's privacy rights for the students in the classroom in regards to being filmed and broadcast, even if it's just their voice that's captured. Freshman orientation, we've already talked about. There's been several questions about what happens if an individual is COVID positive in the building, whether it's a staff member or whether it's a student. We will be working directly with the health department. It is not a situation where necessarily an entire class would be quarantined or an entire school. That's why there's such strict plans in place in terms of keeping attendance throughout the school day, including the lunch period. And it's so the health department can go through and map out the contact that individual had throughout the school day. Things will make a difference, like whether they had a mask on or not, what kind of social distancing was occurring. And the health department determines who is contacted within those individuals that were in contact with the person with COVID. I do want to make clear it is not a situation, again, for privacy laws where we would be making a building-wide announcement or a classroom-wide announcement. However, if it's determined by the health department that a child or a teacher was at risk, it would be the health department reaching directly out to those individuals. A couple questions about updates into how many students are enrolled in the digital academy. Again, this is the commitment form, not the final registration. So a lot of what we do is going to be dependent upon the registration. And I know the fact that we've had deadlines has been very frustrating for people, and I understand it. I mean, we've talked all night about the difficult decisions we have to make. The reason why we need deadlines, though, is because we need to figure out our staffing and what our staffing looks like, and we need to work with our Medina Teachers Association in terms of how we're going to handle teaching an online 2.0 digital academy versus being in the classroom. So we still have a lot of work to do before school starts. I did take a peek today in the commitment form, and keep in mind that some of these are doubled up, but it had just reached over 2,000 students or 2,000 enrollments. Again, that's not a real accurate number, but that's how many people went into the system, and I do know some people did it like 3 or 4 times. I think the bulk of these other questions were answered throughout the presentation. The other one I saw is in terms of how we're going to handle school-wide drills like tornado drills, fire drills, things like that. We do have state mandates in regards to fulfilling those drills. I do know that there's been a lot of discussion about the requirement of the amount of drills being waived or reduced. I don't have information on that. I can tell you that we'll be working directly with our local authorities in making those types of decisions. A lot of the conversations that Chris and I have had as we've walked through buildings it's really this weighing the risks and the benefits. And one thing that we've talked about is the safety of our students is always a priority, and I recognize that COVID and returning to school counts in that safety piece. But if moving desks a certain way or making a hallway a certain way is unsafe in the case of a fire or something like that, we're not going to do it. We're going to find another way to do it. And our executive session at the beginning is over. I think that might have been the most questions we received about that one. And again, we'll go ahead and answer all these in detail, make them available on our website, as well as responding to these individuals' emails.
Thank you, Mr. Sable. At this time, I'll make a motion to move into our second executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline of a public employee or official.
I'll second.
Okay. I would just like to add that there will be no action taken after this executive session.
Did you mention who's joining us?
Thank you, Mr. Hilberg. It's been a long night here. Joining us in joining the board in executive session is Mr. Sable, Mr. Chambers, Dr. Kwolek, and Jim Shields. Thank you.
Ms. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Skidmore,
Aye.
Mr. Hilberg,
Aye.
Ms. Parkhurst,
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
Thank you all.